Hi, Libby. How you doing?
Hello, I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. It's very windy here, but it's good. But yes, I guess through this process, I've gotten to learn a bit more about your work, which has actually been an incredible way to kind of expand on your practice and understand more about what you do. So I guess as an introduction, it'd be great to know about that, but specifically in relation to participatory AI, and how that kind of works in terms of what you formulate.
So basically, I'm a creative technologist, and that's kind of a weird job title, but basically it just means I create technology. So it might be websites, it might be robotics, it might be even kind of graphics and sort of user design for creative applications. So usually I'm working with artists or with musicians or basically anyone with sort of a creative kind of bent to their practice.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of the focus on my residency is going to be participatory AI, and that kind of ties into my practice quite a bit. One thing I really look to in my practice is in ways in that technology marginalizes people, and it might be through the form itself, or it might be through the way it's been developed and conceived throughout the years, and trying to sort of break those barriers. So it might be taking elements from other forms, say dance or craft like crochet, and using that as a way to sort of kind of bridge the gap between um, sort of tech, which is seen as quite a hard thing to get into, or something that people haven't usually been educated about or like don't quite understand, and then using that as like a gap to get people to understand it, so then they can access it a bit more, hopefully.
Mm. I immediately want to ask about crochet in your practice, because I wasn't actually aware of that. Like, could you talk a little bit about how that works with well, with participatory AI or otherwise?
I mean, I've not used crochet for a while in my practice, but when I was a student, actually, I did quite a lot, and that was my final major project. And it's sort of looking at what's called soft robotics, and I've done a few projects like that, where it's like using things like soft toys and then adding a technological element into them. So for example, one thing I created was a little pedometer pet, because I'm quite active, but like it's kind of like a little way to kind of get like kids who like usually use screens quite a lot, so you know, sort of like young children that are like 7 or 8, um but it was a way to get them to like have a soft toy and bring it with them, but also like be able to play with that pet online,
Yeah.
and sort of gaining points by having this pedometer. So the more active you were, the more you could play with your pet, and like had that like little bit of interaction there. But I also do craft as well, like on the side, like I crochet kind of just to like relax and sort of have fun as well. So I make jumpers and things, but that's just part of my like personal like hobbies, really.
The robotics haven't quite come into the clothing just yet, but
Not
maybe
yet,
nearly.
but I am doing a project where hopefully that will be the case. So that's coming up actually, but we'll probably talk a bit more about that in this talk.
Okay, excellent. That's really good. Well, I suppose going into bigger projects and kind of away from craft a little bit, I wanted to ask a bit more about robotics and also the sound play dome, and what that is and how it works.
Yeah, so basically, like as a creative technologist, I'm actually a sort of better word for that is more like a designer, really. So I often work with other organizations. So this is my studio, but it's also part of a company that's called Soundplay Dome. So this is my desk at the studio. I'll just turn this around because you've probably seen this in the background, but this is the actual Soundplay Dome. This is a, trying to see where I can put it up. So this is basically like a big dome that uses projections and other kind of elements for sort of accessible technology.
Uh-huh.
So we're at the minute we're in sort of a development phase of the project. So I've come in to create some more robotics for it in the age of sort of social distancing, because a lot of the robotics they used to use things that were shared, things that were like say drumsticks and things. So they were shared between participants, but obviously now we're trying to look at ways to sort of use things without shared elements. So this is kind of like some work in development, if you just want to have a little look. Sorry, it's so shaky.
No, it's okay.
But this is kind of a crawl space that we're kind of developing. So we've still got some musical elements. I should have talked a bit more. Can you all hear me okay still? Yes? No?
Right in the chat if you can't, anyone.
Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, basically the company I work for, it's founded by a musician and a visual artist. So it's musicians Bal Cook and Ewan Sinclair is the visual artist. And they basically create kind of accessible robotics. So I'm just actually now we're working on things with motion sensors. So if we could just play the first video, if that's okay. Thanks. So it's stuff like this that's going to be built into bigger installations.
Okay.
So it's like using those motion sensors to kind of create sound and visuals. And it's basically kind of geared towards kids with additional support needs. A lot of the times they have communication needs, so it's quite hard for them to say express themselves because they might not be verbal. They might have other accessibility needs. So it's kind of using kind of making musical, it's kind of like making digital musical instruments so that they can kind of like express themselves basically. So that's kind of my main work with this project. And yeah, and basically doing development for robotics with them. So lots of prototypes at the minute that hopefully will become something over the summer. So yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully something people will be able to test, I guess, in real space as well.
Yeah, of course. So we usually travel a lot across Scotland doing workshops, but obviously at the minute that's not happening. So yes.
Okay. And the next thing I wanted to ask you about was the Twitch project and more about your roller skating practice too, and how that kind of influences.
So I'm actually also a professional roller skater. So if we could just play the second video, maybe that will just show you a bit about what I do. Yeah, so there's no sound on this, so I'll just talk over it if that's okay. But I'm part of Sugar and Spin skate crew, and the other skater in this video is Chrissy Ardill. And we're both roller skaters that have a roller skating business in Glasgow, so we do classes. We also do performance as well. And I'm actually on a kind of mini residency with Stella Quine Theatre Company at the minute. So I'm doing a it's kind of like a development work. You're all welcome to come as well. I'm not quite sure how it'll be shared, but I'll can obviously share it when it comes out, but it's kind of using a platform called Twitch, which is usually used for gaming, but it has a chat like it does in Zoom, and basically it'll be like an interactive robotics kind of kind of like theatre piece with roller skating in, and it'll be interactive as well, so you'll be able to like decide like what happens in the chat as like a group of audience members. So yeah, it's going to be exciting and a little bit terrifying because it's something that I've not done before, and I don't think many other people have done on Twitch before. So it's just a kind of development to see how it goes. But yes, that's kind of my own like personal thing.
And I suppose just in terms of that and how the participation works, in terms of that being a game and kind of people coming to the space and you being in the space, and as you said, it's like a new process. How does that work, that people get to interact together in order to formulate what the outcome of that is, or what those movements are?
Yeah, exactly. So basically there's things called bots. They're kind of like chatbots. So they're basically like pre-programmed, like sometimes they're AIs and sometimes they're not, but they're basically kind of like, we'll type in the chat as if they're a person, but they're not a person. So it's kind of creating a narrative through that. But I'm also sort of looking at kind of connection and like how online, because we kind of aren't, we kind of like have masks online, like for example, like we are ourselves, but we're not quite ourselves. It's so easy to misrepresent yourselves online, but also like the ways in which you interact with someone, say through Instagram, is like very different to like how you are like online. So it's kind of like looking, I mean, offline. So it's kind of looking at ways in which yeah, the whole kind of theme of the piece is like looking at ways in which that how we interact online, like especially as women and like Black women, how like a lot of the kind of forms of the technology, say for example like cameras, will kind of naturally like whiten your face because it's like an inbuilt kind of technology within digital cameras that aren't built towards Black skin, so they kind of like create this like weird kind of like kind of whitening effect, and it can actually be like really harmful to your self-esteem, and like, you know, you look different in the mirror than you do to on camera, and sort of looking at how at things like that. And yeah, it's quite like big topics, so it's kind of, yeah, just sort of an explosion of that, and it's probably gonna be quite weird. But it's an experiment and we'll see how it goes.
It seems like, well, it's obviously a really important interrogation, but yeah, just as you said, it's an experiment and an interrogation, but it's also happening live as well. And I don't suppose I have ever understood AI to be able to work like that, as a kind of process-based practice that can happen while everybody is participating in it. And especially because I think I get the sense that you use sound and movement and play a lot in terms of how you were able to engage and develop that as well. So I guess, yeah, I kind of wonder why those genres, I don't suppose they're genres, but you know what I mean. Yeah, why those themes to focus on?
Yeah, I think it's just something I've kind of been looking at like before the pandemic, but then during the pandemic, it's kind of become really pertinent. Like we're kind of forced into digital spaces right now. So like a lot of my work right now is kind of like looking at yeah, looking at the ways in which because there's no like offline space or communal offline space anymore. It's like who's determining these online spaces that we're all in, and like I did a lecture recently that kind of explored a bit more about it, and sort of about how we're kind of conformed by these big companies, and it's kind of like a bit of a social justice element in my work as well, as kind of we're kind of given technology as like a neutral tool, or like AI as a neutral tool, but technology is never neutral because it's always made by someone, and like that someone always has their own biases. So part of why I'm interested in participatory AI as well, and AI that you can change during the cycle of a piece, or the audience can interact with it and kind of interrogate it a bit more, rather than being given something that's almost like a black box and being like, here's your AI, is because it kind of allows you to question the decisions that are being made inside it, and adding your own as well, and being able to manipulate it a bit more, and sort of seeing where in your real life you interact with AIs, because you all interact with AI in our real life. Like maybe it's in your maps program when you drive home, or in the beauty filters that you have when you open your camera on your phone, and sort of looking at those and making them a bit more transparent.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I'm also wondering about the unsupervised learning that AI does. So just in that you're trying to expand, I guess, AI's perceived humanities of us, or its understanding of our humanity as individuals. I also wonder about how it's taught, and this unsupervised learning that AI does, and how we train them. Like once it's already been designed, how we're kind of training them to be more reciprocal to what we need and who we are.
Yeah, I'm obviously not a super expert on AI. I'm kind of like almost a layman in these kinds of terms. So I'm sure an AI researcher will give you a much more thorough answer than I can. But I think a lot of the kind of problems that we have with AI is that we kind of do use it unsupervised. But the thing is, it's only going to amplify bias, say, that's been already fed into the system. Say, for example, TikTok has like a beauty algorithm. I'm talking about beauty quite a lot, but it's kind of like a research of my piece. So sorry. But so TikTok has a beauty algorithm, and basically if you rank higher on its beauty scale, so it ranks everyone's faces, and if you rank higher on its beauty scale, then you'll be pushed into virality. So it means that you will show up more on other people's feeds.
Right.
But the thing is with that beauty algorithm is that researchers who created that only used like white and East Asian faces in it. So it's like, if you're not of those races, then you're not going to have like, it's terrible having a beauty algorithm anyway. I wish it kind of didn't exist. But B, it's got like this implied bias, because it's kind of like, you're not even a human in that scale, if that makes sense. So I think the thing is, like, we kind of, yeah, I think the thing is with, we use unsupervised AI like quite a lot, and it's kind of in like a lot of the things that we use, and we like actually it should be supervised. There's no reason for it not to be supervised. And I think really you can't have, like in my personal opinion, you can't have AIs that are just and fair for like whatever decisions, because the thing is with AI as well is like you might create it for one thing, but then it can always be used for something else. But I think there always has to be that element of human supervision and sort of someone saying, okay, this might not be the intention, but this is the outcome, and is that fair?
Yeah, okay. So it needs to be like a constant monitoring of that process by
Yeah.
many, many people. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I guess kind of moving into your residency, it'd be really interesting to know how that is playing into the work that you're working on with this particular project
Yeah.
and how that's developing too.
Yeah, I think like if I could just like play the third film as well, it might kind of help a little bit, if that's all right. Again, this doesn't have any sound, but this is just me sort of playing with all these faces are AI generated faces, they're not real people. And this second clip as well is me kind of like playing with beauty filters in my face. It's a really weird, like horrible thing. It's not great for your self-esteem. I wouldn't recommend you do it. But sort of looking at how basically trying to like push it to the grotesque, like making something like so beautiful by a machine, and by like laying them over on top of each other, it kind of like to an algorithm that's like the height of beauty, but like actually like I think so there's something always like a little bit uncanny with these faces that we get, because they're so like symmetric. You know, the stuff that AI is looking for is like symmetry and like super clear skin and like eyes that are like kind of like unnaturally, you know, like large or like clear, with no imperfections. And like actually like the imperfections are kind of what makes us human. So that's kind of like what I'm kind of like looking at. And I think that's kind of going to tie into my residency as well, because as I've kind of said, like a lot of my practice is like like looking at sort of marginalized, I say marginalized, but sort of more like unrepresented data in the data sets, if you're going to look at it in a really hard way. So I'm kind of going to be looking at dance quite a bit, because we're kind of like we've got like the National Library of Scotland have very kindly let us look at some of their data sets as well, and I was kind of looking through their archives, and they have quite a few books from, I want to say like the 1700s or 1800s, and it's Scottish. It's a Scottish books, but they're called like English ballads, and so it would be like the Almanac of 1861 English ballad. So it means in English. It's not English, but it's like Scottish in English. So not in, say, Gaelic. But it is so it's kind of like that's meant to be like, you know, a historical document of everything that's in Scotland, for example. But like that's in itself is kind of like a decision that someone's made, like whose ballads are in there, who, you know, there's obviously like huge populations at the time, because that would have been sort of like at the height of slavery, if I've got my dates right, which I might not do, sorry, historians. But those people would have been sort of counted as Scottish assets. So like, do their ballads get included in the book? Probably not. So basically my kind of research is looking for this residency is going to be looking at kind of like a 2021, like what is a Scottish, what is Scottish dance? What is if we're going to create an almanac of Scottishness, instead of me or anyone like deciding what is Scottish or what is dance or what is anything, why don't we try and put everything into an AI, see what the AI comes up with, but also let people tell the AI no and see if they can kind of interrogate that as well for themselves and make it a bit of a collaborative process.
And will that involve people kind of replicating what some of the material that you're getting from the archive, as well as kind of contemporary interpretations or just gestural
Yeah.
performances or interactions with that as well?
Yeah, so I'm probably gonna, I mean, it's quite early days because we've got quite a bit of time in this residency, but to start off with, I'm just gonna be, looking at the material and sort of seeing how it's kind of reflected in kind of modern day. Do we still use these ballads? Do we not? Who knows? And then kind of, bring them to sort of groups who are in Scotland, just sort of groups that have any interest in dance. I don't really mind what it is. Feel if you do happen to be a group who's interested in dance or music as well, and you want to get in touch and be a part of this, like please feel free to like get in touch, because I'm interested in absolutely everything. That's the whole point of this residency. And just sort of seeing people who are based in Scotland and what they bring to it. So it might be a form as choreography that I bring to them and be like, okay, this is sort of some choreography that came through these ballads. Like, what do you think of it? How do you interpret it? I'm kind of, as well, on this residency, we have been working with the Social Brain in Action Lab. I may not have said that right. It's called SOBA. So they're researchers with Glasgow University. So I've been talking to a researcher called Koino Dada. I hope I'm saying that right. And she's been sort of looking at like AI generated choreography, which is quite fun. It's quite weird because AIs don't really understand the human body, or like you're kind of just given poses, if that makes sense. They don't kind of understand a lot of
Flow.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's like groove. You can't teach a machine groove, like so yeah, that's really interesting. So I might try and generate some choreography and see what people think of that, basically.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And I suppose that kind of stage of the project will, again with restrictions, but will involve a lot more people, and hopefully in space as well, because I know there's potential obviously for that to happen outside or inside as you're doing that research.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully as well, I know restrictions might still be in place as well, but I think one thing that we have that is like has been maybe a good side of the pandemic as well is like people are being a lot more digital. I know everyone's probably a bit fatigued by it by now, but hopefully that's something that we can like kind of incorporate. So I think it could be definitely something that could be browser based. It could be an AI that lives like on the internet, so anyone can access it like anywhere in theory. So that's something that might happen as well.
Okay. Well, yeah, perhaps we can share some details so that if people are interested in that, they can get in touch. Directly too. I guess we'll maybe open up to questions as well, and kind of just keep talking and dropping in on some things, because there's probably a couple of things I might want to ask as well. But if anyone does have any questions, you can post them in the Q&A and I'll read them out. One thing I did want to ask, actually, just to go way backwards, but you were talking about one of the projects you're involved in maybe involving robotics in clothing or in costume, and obviously I'm quite interested in that. Can you talk a little bit more about that at the moment? Also, if you can't, that's okay.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's just a bit of a surprise right now because it will be part of the roller skating Twitch performance. So I don't want to like give the game away and how it will come up, but I'm working with a designer called Zephyr Liddle, who's really great, and we're kind of coming up with some clothing prototypes that integrate robotics. So we will see how that appears.
I think there's something so exciting about that, especially with everything you're talking about. And I don't know, even if it then goes as far in other iterations as participatory AI, how you can wear robotics that also other people have, I guess, had access to manipulate, that also you are manipulating at the same time. So it seems, seems complex, but also quite exciting in terms of what that could be.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, it's going to be quite an experiment. That's all I can really say about it. And it might not work on the first iteration as I intended, but that's also how it is, and that's how it is when you put things on the internet as well, like because you don't know who's going to turn up. So yeah.
Fun. Most definitely.
I think there's some questions in the chat. Am I okay to
answer? Yeah, so thanks. I was looking in the wrong chat, as inevitably I would be. So what what do you value most in your studio? Just in terms of space, light, size. I mean, there's a lot of projects and big projects that you're working on as well. So it's quite
Yeah,
important.
I think actually it's quite so I've not shown it, but I actually have, so this isn't technically my studio, this is a studio I share, but downstairs it's kind of messy because I've just kind of like moved in, but it's I've got a roller skating space downstairs. So that's like
Mhm.
probably the bit I like the most, because it's so hard to find roller skating spaces.
Mhm.
So it means I can incorporate physical practice every day. I mean, I say that, but I've not started yet. But I only moved in last week, so I'm giving myself a little bit of a a break. But so that's quite rare. Like finding spaces to roller skate is quite rare, and that's like a whole other topic on like access to sport and access to space that I could start and
Mhm.
never stop. But also that's quite good about it is it's in Paisley as well, and it's in sort of a disused like office space, but I actually really like working in the town of Paisley. I've done like a few projects with the YMCA there, and I just it's just nice being, I'm kind of like from a small town that's called like Wakefield, that's kind of similar to it, and it's actually like just really nice, like sort of bringing kind of different practice and like working with people from small towns, because
Mhm.
I think, yeah, sometimes they kind of just get left out of like from all the stuff that happens in Glasgow and the big cities. It's actually quite nice to like be somewhere a bit smaller and like being able to work with people that have like, you know, different kind of like experience, and it's not like every day that you get to like have different things on your doorstep as well if you're in Paisley. But I think it's a really great town and I really love it.
Amazing, but I can definitely imagine just in terms of access for other people as well, and also how they'll interact with the work you're doing, because it's not necessarily something that comes up that often, particularly outside of a big city. So I can imagine that's really amazing. And another question from Annette is, when did you start roller skating? Because I've done a class with you, which was with a few of us, which was probably like one of the most exciting evenings ever. So everyone should do it, I think. But yeah, when did you begin, and when did you start teaching as well?
Yeah, so I started roller skating. I went to a Halloween roller disco. I think it was like in
Mhm.
2013, so it's probably like, I don't know, 6, 7
Oh
years
wow.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like
And
that.
I played a sport called roller derby for a good chunk of those years. So I was
Okay.
played for quite a few teams. I've traveled a lot throughout the UK, so I played like for like 9 teams, I think, and did tournaments abroad and things like that. But I actually really got into roller dance as well. I think it's really interesting. Like it has like lots of different elements to it. Like there's like artistic, and there's like jam skating, which is like a whole different scene. And then I'm kind of doing weird, almost like contemporary dance type stuff with it half the time, but
Okay.
also like commercial stuff in classes, which I really enjoy. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a good answer. I just really enjoy it, and I can't like really imagine myself like not skating. I think I'll probably be like 90 and still skating. I ice skate as well, just any
Wow.
kinds of skating. I'm just kind of a bit obsessed, really. It's a bit sad.
But also great that you can actually put that into your practice as well. I mean, oftentimes these things stay separate, but actually, I think it's really interesting how that's coming into this game that you're, or this game scenario that you're putting together too, and kind of extends that.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. I think because it's not been complete yet. It's kind of like, will this actually make sense? But maybe it will. Maybe it won't. Who knows? But yeah, it's just yeah, I think it's just something I'm always gonna probably have, and it's just great like performing. It's great. Yeah, it's great doing classes and like teaching new people and like sort of bringing it everywhere that I can. It's roller skating's actually had like a huge boom during lockdown as well. So
Mm.
being we're like gearing up for the summer and being able to do classes again, and we're just getting like loads of inquiries. So it's like so great to see like all the new people like roller skating and everything that's going on. So yeah.
Amazing. And in terms of the community groups you engage in your work as well, which I know must again cross over into the roller skating work you do, but also just in terms of how you formulate some of the AIs as well. Have you been doing that community work for as long? So is it kind of a sense of all those strands of your practice kind of coming and weaving together?
Yeah, like I think it just yeah, it's just kind of in and out and flowing with different things for different people. Like so before I've worked with like Vogue Scotland, who are like really great, and kind of just like building communities in Scotland that are kind of like yeah, kind of like geared towards like marginalized groups, so like queer people and people of color, and I think yeah, I think it's just because obviously I'm part of those communities as well, so it's kind of like nice to kind of like give back like a lot of ways, or like kind of like make work that kind of centers those voices or tries to center those voices as much as it can. Just yeah, just because I feel like we don't always get work made for us, so it's kind of like nice to work with those groups, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even when you were talking about yeah, how the camera changes, and I was like, oh, let me just have a quick look. But I suppose that must, yeah, all those things are things that people get to understand in their immediacy, and also begin to just change quite quickly.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think it's just I think it's there's actually like quite a lot going on in tech at the minute. There's been, so at Google, there's been basically they fired an AI researcher who was kind of saying like, hey, your AI is biased, and they just fired her. So now there's like protests kind of like going on and petitions being done. It's called Timnit Gebru, if you want to research the name.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that's always been going on, but I think now, just because it's becoming like such a part of our lives, it's something that like people are now like really starting to focus on and like hopefully change.
Have you kind of noticed any changes being implemented on a bigger scale as well in more recent times, as it's becoming more public that actually these implicit biases that are part of AI? Are there things that certain companies or organizations are doing more publicly to articulate what they're trying to do to adapt any of their systems? Maybe not, but I just kind of
Yeah,
wonder.
that's kind of like a difficult question. I'd say yes, but I think a lot of the times, just because so the people who make up the organizations aren't very diverse, or like at the very top they're not very diverse. I actually did like a talk about this that probably explains it a bit better, but like a lot of the big tech companies, sort of like Amazon and Facebook and like Google not so much, but like I think of the other ones like Microsoft, they kind of have like they kind of built like an empire. They're sort of, so they have like an emperor at the head. So like Mark Zuckerberg is kind of like the, you know, there's a book that's come out about him, and it's called like The Boy Kings, and they're kind of like, so these companies are kind of built like to gear all the wealth and gear all the power and decision making to like one person and their friends, and it's kind of like when they're the only people in the room, then how much can actually change is kind of like a bit of a question. So yes, there is things being done, but I would say, and this is obviously my personal opinion, that I think the way that these companies are structured are actually kind of problematic in themselves, and I think we're kind of in the world of technology, we're kind of in the same stage as we were with the sort of kind of railroad companies like in the US back in the 1800s and rubber barons, where it's kind of like there needs to be more power to the workers in these companies, and also the people who have to live with these kind of infrastructures that they built as well. That's quite a quite a long answer to that question, but
No, I don't suppose it's really a simple question actually when you're going into it. So yeah, I think when you I think presenting the fact that it is about structural issues that also just trickle down to how that is perceived by everybody else and how we understand it, and perhaps even reperpetrate it, is really important to acknowledge. There aren't any quick fixes, which I think is something we've spoken about before as well. It has to keep generating. We have to keep kind of looking at what we're failing at and what we're succeeding at, and keep trying to be adaptable.
Yeah, for sure. I think so one thing I kind of talked about before in a talk I said was it's more it's almost like seeing it as like anarchist AI, or like
Mm.
kind of, instead of being people being viewed as a data set, because like when you're say using facial recognition with like an Apple like with Apple ID or whatever it is, you're not being seen as a human, you're being seen as like a data set, like you're just being seen as numbers, and it's like actually like giving you power instead, to being like, no, I'm not just, you know, 365 point A node B, like I'm actually like a human being with like feelings and what I'm being classified as, and I should be able to change my classification.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite important actually. Yeah, I didn't think of that. I should be able to change how I'm perceived outside of this number and
Yeah.
rigidity as well. Are there any talks and performances you've got coming up as well? Because you were just saying that actually you've spoken about quite a lot of these things in different spaces.
Yeah, I think they've been recorded. I don't have the links to them though, so it's kind of hard to share
Sure.
them. But I think some of them, one was with the Race, Rights and Sovereignty series that I
Okay.
did for Glasgow School of Art in January, and
Yeah.
another one was for Present Futures, which was in February, I want to
Yeah.
say, which was a
Yeah.
panel talk.
Yeah.
Coming up, potentially have something, but it's not confirmed, with Neon Festival actually, which is part of the partners for this talk. And I think I'm trying not to give too much away because it's not confirmed yet.
Okay.
I think it's going to be on feminist ethics and technology.
Okay.
But I can't say much more about that because I don't want to say something if it's not
Then you
official.
shouldn't say. That's
Yeah.
fine. Tell us, is there anything else, just I guess before we kind of start to wrap up a little bit, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or share in terms of your work or what's coming up for you?
Yeah, I think mainly just keep an eye out if you'd like to come to the Twitch kind of interactive roller skating show.
Yeah.
Again, it might be a bit weird, but feel free to join. If you are, I'm just going to do a shameless plug here, but if you are interested in roller skating as well, if you follow Sugar and Spin, that's my roller skating company, so you can come be taught roller skating if you want. It doesn't matter if you've never done it before. Take complete beginners, so yeah. But yeah, I got yeah, just more things coming up. Oh, one thing I completely forgot to talk about is I'm
Yeah.
also I'm more of a producer for this, but I'm kind of producing a VR kind of like gallery opening on performance night with Tramway, which you're all also welcome to come to. But I'm giving like a little project opening talk about that on Thursday as well. So I'm going to be more of I'm going to be Sabrina in that talk. I'm going to be more of the host than the panel, like a panelist. But you can find a bit more about that on Thursday if people would like to come to that as well.
That sounds interesting. Just to recap, you were just saying you're doing an intro to the VR elements of the programming that's coming up on the tram.
Yeah, so I'm kind of helping produce this VR showcase that we've got with Tramway, because Tramway are sort of looking again, because the building isn't open because of coronavirus. We're sort of looking at ways to create audience interaction online. So one ways you can do that is through VR, which is kind of like it's kind of like a bit like a game, but actually we're using it to kind of create art. So we're getting some local artists, so it's Shanti Harris and Natasha Ruona, and they're going to be creating some work for us in VR. So it's kind of like giving you an intro to them and like what they think about VR, kind of what their sort of embryonic plans are for the sort of semi-residency that they're going on, and as well we'll have some performance on that night as well, not on the night with the talk, but on the night with the VR showcase that'll be in summer sometime, so that'll be June or July. And if you're local to Tramway as well, like in Pollock Shields or Govan Hill, where I live, we're going to be giving away some headsets as well, like through Govan Hill Baths. So you might want to like keep an eye out for those as well.
Okay, it's really interesting. I really like the idea of spacing that as well. Obviously, as you were saying earlier, everything's moving into a digital space, but actually ramping up quite quickly in terms of how people are interacting, what they're understanding, kind of having virtual reality be available in that kind of way. I don't know, it didn't seem so easy last year, and it feels like people are making it seem easy at the moment. So that'll be really exciting to see and hear.
Yeah, again, it's like a bit of an experiment. Like I've done like some VR things, but I've not used it in an artistic kind of like way. And the two artists that we're working with as well are quite new to VR, so again, it's just kind of like a learning new skills like everyone has done in this time, I think. Yeah, so yeah.
Okay, amazing. Um, yeah, I think that'll be everything. It's been really nice to speak to you.